Good evening, everyone. Happy Rosh Chodesh. Tonight is the first day of the month of Adar Sheni, the second Adar, of course, the month that we enter in Purim. So, as we get into the third class tonight of the four-part series of Purim, we're really getting into things. Also, welcome to the final class this year in the 7th hour. Meaning that we change the clocks. Starting next week, God willing, the clock gets pushed 1 hour, and so does evening services, and therefore so does the class. So next week, starting from next week, instead of 7:05, it is 8:05, and next week is, there should be 14, right there. Next week is the fourth class of the Purim series. The week after that, on Thursday, of course, there is no class because in 2 Thursdays from now is Purim. And instead of a class, there is a very big party, Purim party. The week that follows that, we immediately launch into Pesach, into Passover, as we start getting ready for Passover. And we'll have a 4-part series starting from the week after Purim. So next week is the 4th of Purim. The week after that is Purim itself. The week following that, we begin the Passover series, and it's been posted online. We have a sign on the bulletin board advertising that, etc., etc., and that is all, of course, after 8 p.m. So this is the final class at this hour for this year, God willing, in Galut. Okay. 2 weeks ago, we spoke about Mordechai. And last week we spoke about Esther, Queen Esther. And the aim that I was aiming at in the past 2 weeks was to demonstrate to all of us and highlight specifically the miracles, where the miracles began, and choosing the essential theme on which the entire story is pretty much circling around. We spoke about Queen Esther's heroism. We spoke about her courage last week. And speaking about how it was to her actions in making the first move, putting her life at risk, and brushing with death on many occasions, and still coming out successful. In tonight's class, we're going to be focusing on the beginning of Hamans' downfall, and the beginning of the open miracle, the way it is described in the Talmud, and on the commentaries. And we will see how the entire story unravels itself in a very, very mysterious night. In one night, everything even beyond what could possibly have been imagined begins to unfold. This is in a way a continuation from last week's class, where I don't think I even had a chance to touch on it. But Esther, in her move to convince the king, from all the things that she requested when she put her life on the line to come into the king's inner chamber, what was the one thing that she requested? She could have had the whole world at that point. In fact, we learned last week, King Ahasuerus, she had a change of heart in an instant, and went from wanting to execute her right away to suddenly telling her, "Oh, my Esther, my darling, what do you want? Up to half of my kingdom." Esther could easily have asked right then and there, "Save my people." Not a big deal. In present day age, the Jewish people count for 0.02 or something like that of the world's population. And things were not that much different under the Persian Empire, King Ahasuerus, who ruled over 127 provinces, and according to some opinions, that was the entire world. He was not just a superpower, but the ultimate power in those days. No one was not under the jurisdiction of King Ahasuerus. And so when you're talking about the king over the entire world, the Jewish people, how much of a percentage were they? So if Esther says, "Save my kingdom, save my people, spare their lives," that wasn't too much to ask for. That wasn't half the kingdom. But instead Esther requested a party. Come to a party with you, my dear king, my husband, and Haman, the three of us. This question had bothered the Talmud, had bothered the commentaries. Of all the things she asked for, she missed the magical moment. Her time passed. She could have asked for anything. A party? What was the logic behind this? The Talmud gives no less than 12 different answers. 12 different reasons on a possible strategy that Esther had. She was thinking up something, and she wanted things to go in the realm of nature. So there were 12 different answers, reasons given, that Esther thought to herself, different strategies that she had put together. Some of them I'll just name off the bat. She was thinking to herself, if I invite Haman, it will instill jealousy in the king. The king might think, oh wow, inviting Haman, is Esther and Haman conspiring against me? Maybe they're having something. Maybe they both want to kill me. And a revenge tactic, a revenge ritual they're going to play on me. Another opinion, he thought to himself, Esther inviting Haman, are they having an affair? Maybe they want to get rid of me. Maybe this is a whole plot. Another opinion, Esther was doing this to instill jealousy not just on the king, but on the entire parliament. Imagine all the ministers and all the parliamentarians are looking and seeing suddenly, oh wow, Haman is being invited to a personal feast. So hopefully, if she's able to build jealousy among the parliamentarians, hopefully that might create such strong jealousy that they might turn their backs on Haman. And when the right time comes for Haman's downfall, they will encourage it. They might be on her side. And so on and so forth. There are 12 different reasons, 12 different strategies. And one rabbi, I believe it was Rava, he merited the revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi. Rabba Baravua met Eliyahu Hanavi, met Elijah the prophet. And when you have a moment of the revelation of Elijah the prophet, you can ask anything. I mean, what would you ask Elijah the prophet if you had the revelation? And what did he ask Eliyahu? He asked him, we were studying in our academy, we were studying 12 different reasons offered as to Esther's. Maybe you can tell us what was the true reason. You're up high, you're coming from heaven. What was Esther's true reason? So what did Eliyahu tell him? He told him, they were all correct. Elijah told them they were all correct. All 12 reasons. That was everything going through Esther. Esther thought through all of them. Why am I bringing this up? This was last class. Why am I bringing this up? We shall see how what Esther was trying to build on her strategy not just comes to fruition. Comes to fruition in a way, at lightning speed, in such a way that Esther herself could not even imagine was possible. And so with that, we begin chapter 6. And on the theme of tonight is collusions and delusions, where we speak about how Haman trying to be colluding with others in a thing against Esther, against Achashverosh, and the delusions that Haman had, not realizing that he was putting himself into a trap, hastening his downfall in a very, very fast and very quick way. Excuse me. Okay. So, please feel free to open up your source sheets. Source number 1. This is the opening 3 verses of chapter 6. That night, this was the night following. This is the night following Esther's request to have a feast, and Esther actually sitting down. We skipped a little bit of the story, like I said before. We're not really going through the entire story. We're just highlighting the main parts, the essential parts. This follows after Esther already had the meal. She has the meal with King Achashverosh and with Haman. And at the feast, King Achashverosh asks her, "My queen, we're sitting by the meal now. You told me that you're going to tell me what you want after we sit by the feast. We're now sitting by the feast. What is it you want?" What does Esther say? She thinks in her head, time's not ripe yet. So she tells the king, tomorrow, come to another feast. Come to a second feast tomorrow with you and Haman. And tomorrow I'm going to reveal. Haman leaves, all happy. He sees Mordechai, and his whole day went... And he has a personal vendetta, of course, against Mordechai, and he decides rather than there, I gotta get rid of Mordechai. I cannot wait 11 months until other time when we get rid of all the Jews. I gotta get rid of Mordechai now. I can't stand the sight of Mordechai. And so, of course, as the story goes, he consults with his wife Zeresh and his children, his 10 sons, among others. He had many children, and they conspire to build a gallows 50 cubits high to hang Mordechai on. That night is the night we're talking about. Nadada shnas hamelech, the king's sleep was disturbed. Vayomer, and he says, Lahavi asefer zechronos divrei hayamim vayun nekrom ufnei hamelech. He ordered the book of Chronicles, the book of records, to be brought and to be read, and it was read, to the king. Verse 2, Vayimatzeh chasuv, and it was found that it was written, Asher higid Mordechai el bigson of Seresh, that Mordechai had denounced Bigson and Seresh, Shnei Sersei HaMelech, 2 of the king's guards, Asher Bikshu l'Sheach Yad, who had conspired, who had plotted to get rid of Melech Achashverosh, the king Achashverosh. Verse 3, Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said, upon hearing this, in the book of Chronicles, Ma na'asa yikaru gdula l'Mordechai al zeh. What honor or advancement had been conferred on Mordechai for this? Vayomru narei hamelch masharasav, and the king's servants who were in attendance said, Lo nasa imay davar. Nothing at all has been done for him. So these 3 verses are what we are going to be focusing on tonight. And there are many things. We're going to peel away layer upon layer. You think about the entire story of Esther, and really we should be opening it up almost like an accordion book, where we have a few pages, but if you open it up, each word speaks volumes and volumes. And I've spoke to some of you already till now. The truth is, the entire story, the entire Megillah story, the entire story of Esther, literally itself could be an entire year of classes, because there is just so much that we can delve on and speak about. And of course, our aim is not to do that. Our aim is to highlight things within an hour. Okay. So, on that night, the king's sleep was disturbed. That's the first words. Now, we must understand that this is the beginning of the miracle. We're going to jump to source number, on the following page, we're going to jump to source number 4. We're going to read the first line of it and then come back to it later. Quoting the Megillah. Quoting not the Megillah, we just quoted the Megillah. We're quoting now the Talmud. The Talmud that starts off saying, Balayla hu nadada shnas hamelech. On that night the king's sleep was disturbed. Omer Rabbi Tanchum says, Nadada shnas malchus shel Ela. It wasn't just the king's sleep was disturbed, the king of the world was awakened. The king of the world. Rabbanan Amri, rabbis say, the Rabbanan say, Nadadu tacht elyonim, nadadu tachtainim. The sleep of the higher ones, the angels, was disturbed, and the sleep of the lower ones, the Jewish people, was disturbed as well. Amarava shnas hamacha chashverish mamash naf. It was literally the king's sleep. Literally the king's sleep. So before we go any further than this, before we go to the rest of this quote in the Talmud, we must understand, according to Chassidus, this gives us a lot more. What does it mean that the king is awakened, and what does it mean the king is sleeping? Of course, when we're talking about the fact that it's alluding to the Holy One, blessed be He, the king of the entire universe, God Almighty Himself, what does it mean the king's sleep is disturbed? What does it mean God is sleeping, God's awake? What does it mean God doesn't go to sleep, He doesn't wake up? God's not a human being. And anything that's alluding to God is metaphorical. It's not something to be taken literally. So Chassidus explains, the previous Rebbe explains, this is actually the first Chassidic discourse that the previous Rebbe said upon his arrival to the United States in 1940. his very first Hasidic discourse is Balayla Ahu. On that night, the king's sleep was disturbed, and he explains over there that there is, based on all the Rebbe's teachings, the 7 Chabad Rebbe's, that there's a concept. What does it mean that God's sleeping, and what does it mean that God is awakened? It means that God puts himself into a status of sleep. What does it mean, sleep? That many wonders of God, many things that we consider wonders, where things transcend nature, are in a concealed state, that we don't see it. So specifically, we're talking about the time of exile. When we are in exile, when we're not experiencing revelations, things that transcend nature, exile represents a time of sleep, when everything is concealed. And so therefore, when it says in the Megillah that on that night the king's sleep was disturbed, it means that God created a revelation. There was an open miracle that was experienced, causing an awakening of God, meaning that God is putting a revelation into this world, a revelation of godliness that we experience, so to speak, an awakeness, a wakefulness. Okay? And Rashi tells us this is source number 2, that Nadad Shnas HaMelech, that the king's sleep was disturbed, Nes Haya, it was a miracle. This was a miracle. And I added in, otherwise, would Achashverosh's sleep be disturbed, particularly on this night after having partied earlier in the day? Achashverosh's sleep was disturbed by a dream in which he saw Haman grabbing a sword to kill him. Okay, we're going to talk about that at length. Rashi over here adds one of the thoughts that the king was thinking in his mind, and that is, he took to heart, he began thinking to himself. And here we enter the Talmud. The Talmud says, and Rashi over here brings not the Talmud, but he brings the Talmud, and we're going to see that Talmud in a second. He starts thinking to himself, why is the king's sleep disturbed? He starts thinking to himself about all the aspects of the day. You can imagine, sometimes when you have a lot of things happening in one day, your mind is racing so much you can't sleep. He's tossing and turning. He's thinking to himself, why is it that Esther had invited Haman? Are they conspiring to kill me? Because usually when two people have an idea, when two people have a thing going on between them, it usually is at the expense of a third, when they're conspiring, to creating a conspiracy. So Achashverosh starts thinking to himself, if they're not telling me, if there's something that they're hiding from me and they're not telling me, right? It must be that they have something that they're conspiring against both of them. Maybe they're conspiring to assassinate me. So he goes further. So this is the Talmud. Back to source number 4, where we go further. He begins talking to himself. He starts telling to himself, Naflele milsa bedaite. A thought pops in his head. Achashverosh. Omar, he says, Mai de kamanda zimte Esther lahaman. What's going on over here? What is this that Esther had invited Haman? Dilma eitzaka shakli elai dahu gavra l'mikatli. Right? Perhaps they're conspiring against that man, meaning me, to kill me. Maybe they're conspiring to kill me. He's thinking to himself. Especially with Haman being elevated. Maybe Haman really is trying to seize my crown. He's trying to unseat me. And as we're going to see later on, Achashverosh was a very, very paranoid person. There are two things that we're going to see as we go further and dig deeper. Achashverosh had two personality traits about him. Very, very paranoid, and also very, very quick to act without thinking. Very, very, impulsive. Very, very impulsive person. And very, very hastily decrees things without going through due process. Very jumps to it right away. So he tells himself, maybe that they're conspiring to kill me. And he goes further on. Amar hi achi, he says, if it's so that they're conspiring to kill me, Why isn't someone telling me about this? Could it be I have no friends? There's no one that likes me? He says to himself, there's no one that actually has mercy on me. There's someone that doesn't like me that's going to actually tell me. No one wants to tell me this. Then he thinks that his mind is still thinking. This is all the Talmud. The Talmud still say this is what's going through the King Achashverosh's mind. He says to himself, he starts thinking to himself, maybe there's someone that actually did a favor to them, that they did a favor for me, and I never paid them back for it. Maybe this is why the people are they're holding back from telling me the truth, and they're not telling me something. Maybe they're upset at me. Maybe Esther is upset at me. Maybe Esther did a favor for me and saved my life. It did something very big for me and didn't tell me. And she's very upset at me. And that's why maybe she's conspiring with Haman to kill me. King's mind is racing. So I want to quote something very, very interesting. We'll get to that later. Okay. So therefore he says, bring the chronicles. Why the chronicles? So Rashi says, don't get too carried away. Very, very often. I think it was source number 3. Yep. Source number 3. Rashi says, Lavi Sefer Zechronos. The English is on the other side, the next page. He says, don't worry, Derech HaMelachim, it's normal for kings. It's a normal thing. When their sleep is disturbed. It's very normal of kings. Read from me a boring speech. Read from me a very boring story or something. When you speak about records of things that happened in the past, it's very, very boring. And usually when it's boring, when something is too boring, it's very easy for someone listening to start falling asleep. Sometimes we have people in the class, if I sound too boring, if I'm so monotone and I'm not, sometimes people might fall asleep. So he says, okay, start reading from me Book of Chronicles.
Look at me.
No, I was looking at me. Looking at myself, really. So he says, bring out the Book of Chronicles. Read something to me boring. Yep. But Rashi does end up quoting. He does quote the inner midrashic pirish explanation. He says, Rabbi Seinu Amu, V'tosh nasim libe al Haman, ve'Esther Amar yefshesh liyeda adam shua'eya v'yatzasim v'galali v'chasavam shemeras li adam. He quotes the Talmud. Rashi quotes the Talmud that we just said. Impossible, someone who's my friend should not know their plan and divulge it to me. Maybe someone did me a favor, I did not repay him, and they do not care about me anymore. Bring the book of archives. I need to see. Did someone ever do a favor for me and I did not repay them?
That's why you got the
what was that?
That's why you got the book.
And that's why, based on the Talmud explains, this is the logic. This is why he's asking for the Sefer HaZichronos, for the Book of Chronicles. So what happens? And they found that it was written. This is back to source number 1, verse 2. It was found that Mordechai told about Bigsan and Seresh, the 2 guards that wanted to kill the king. He notified, he saved the king's life, basically. Okay, what does it mean? I'm going to get a little grammatical now. Vayimatzei, I'm going to translate literally the way it is written. Vayimatzei chasuv, and he found that it was written. He found it written. He found it written. What does it mean, he found it written? It should have said, Vayimatzei kasav. And he found that someone else, that it was written, that someone wrote it. What does it mean, and he found it written? I mean, he's opening a book. Every word that's on that page is written. What does it mean, he found it written? What's so novel about this? That he found it written. He has a book of Chronicles in front of him. He's reading whoever this person is. So obviously there's something going on over here that doesn't make sense. And even though that this is the book of Esther, and not the 5 books of the Torah where we say that every single letter we can build volumes on it, with the prophets and writings, Nevi'im and Kesuvim, we don't say that. But we do. We still say that. That every single word and letter written in the Megillah, like we said, is like an accordion book. We have to peel it. We have to peel it layer upon layer to discover the inside of things. So, the Talmud continues and tells us. So, there's a lot of Talmud I'm going to include tonight. There's a lot that I'm going to include tonight. Instead of putting it into the source page, I added it as a photocopy of the Gemara Talmud itself, and that is on the backside of your sheets. And it's the very first words on the top of the page. I'm going to just say the words before that, and then add us in, and that is Vayiyu Nikroim. Oh, before we get there. Vayiyu Nikroim. It says, and they were written. The first verse that we said. He said, bring the book of Chronicles, Vayiyu Nikroim. And they were read before the king. So think about it this way. The king says his sleep was disturbed, and he says, bring the book of Chronicles, and they were recited before the king. So he's talking in future tense, in instruction. And then it says, Vayiyu, and they were. And that's past tense. That doesn't make sense. Either we're speaking in future terms, that he's giving a tzivoy, he's giving a commandment, an instruction to the guards, bring me a book of Chronicles. And why suddenly we're talking in past tense, Vayiyu? Because, why am I saying that? Because Va, a patach under a Vav, is a Vava Hippoch. Vava Hippoch means a change around Vav. Whenever it's in front of a word, it takes something that's future tense and converts it to past tense. By the way, my second, third, and fourth graders know this. A Vav with a patach, a Vav, a Hippoch, it changes future tense to past tense. Okay? What should it have said? What grammatically should have been here to imply future tense? A shava. V'yihiyu. V'yihiyu, when there is a shava under the Vav, it implies future tense. But there is no shava here, it's a patach. So therefore, for those who are able to speed read together with the Balkari, with the one reading the Megillah, he says, if he says V'yiyu Nikron, you'll stop him. You got it wrong. Not V'yiyu, Vayihiyu. And we mean business, because as we see, that Nakuda, that vowel change, is the entire Talmud is basing itself off. What does it mean? And it was written in past tense. Says the Talmud, Malamed, it's teaching us. These are actually the final words back on source number 4. We're jumping back and forth. The last words of source number 4. Vayiyu Nikroim, and they were written. What does that mean? Malamed teaching us Shenikroim me alehen. They were read miraculously by themselves. It was a talking book.
Does Hebrew have something, if I remember my English, past perfect? It had been written? Is there a construction like that?
Yes.
Okay. But it wasn't used here.
It had, Nikraim, it had been recited.
Okay.
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
Like, Hayu Kurim, they were reading, would make more sense. Over here it's Vayiyu Nikraim, and it was recited. So I think that's exactly what you're referring to. Okay, but back to what I said before. I'm sorry, we're jumping back and forth. So says the Talmud, Vayimatze Chasuv, and he found that it was written. What does it mean? He found that it was written. He's reading it. Kasav mi bayale, says the Talmud. It should have said he wrote. It should have written he wrote. And they found that he wrote, the scribe wrote, A, B, and C. Why does it mean? And he found that it was written. Melamid, it teaches us, and these are the first words that you see on the back page in the Talmud, Shimshai Meichek v'Gavriel Kaisiv. Who was reading it? Shimshai, the king's scribe, who by the way was also Hamans' son. He was erasing the book, erasing from the record book the account of Mordechai saving the king's life. the Gavriel Kosef, but the angel Gabriel, the angel Gavriel wrote it back in. What is going on over here? The Talmud is alluding to it, but of course the Medrash takes up on this and explains more in detail. I'm just going from the Talmud Series, explaining as follows: what was going on? Shimshai, who was Hamans' son, was not too eager about reading the story about how Mordechai saved the king's life. So he was trying to skip that page. Skip. However, what was happening? The page kept on going back. He was moving to the next page. The page kept flipping itself back to the page with Mordechai. Miraculously, of course. So the king Achashverosh is getting impatient. Get on with it. Read already. So Shimshai, he's trying to say a different story. But then suddenly, Vayun Nekrayim, and it was a talking book. Miraculously, the book started talking. He was trying to erase. The book started talking. And in the end, he ended up finishing it. He had no choice. The book was talking. The book was saying the king was getting very, very angry at him. You're withholding potentially important information from me. Begin talking. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to talk. So the book started talking for itself. This is the Midrash on what happened with the Book of Chronicles. There's a question that the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks. He asks, what's going on over here? We expect that there's supposed to be some sort of miracle. And of course things are unraveling in a very, 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 very quickly. But what is this whole business? We're jumping back and forth between an open miracle and a concealed miracle. If the whole point was that the king should be notified that Mordechai had saved his life, to let the book just finish talking. And if the whole point was that there should not be a miracle, then why are the pages flipping? Why is Shimshai talking? What's going on over here? Is there a miracle or is there not a miracle? Is the whole idea is that there's supposed to be something that transcends nature or not? In fact, this is especially so when Chassidus teaches us that miracles don't just happen by chance. We don't just experience miracles. The whole point of us in this world, when we do a mitzvah, we're supposed to be doing a mitzvah in this world within nature. When we serve God, it's supposed to be within the realms of nature. Otherwise, mitzvahs belong with angels in the sky. Why is Jewish practice, the study of Torah and performance of mitzvahs, why is it deliberately put in this world? Because it needs to be within nature. And so therefore, when we experience a miracle, there is a message for it, and it needs to be, ultimate miracles are miracles that don't change nature, but are done within nature. Similar to, we can illustrate this similarly with the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe Rosh Zalman of Liadi. Very famous stories, particularly connected with the 19th of Kislev, which was his liberation from jail. On his way to jail, there were two occurrences. One occurrence was he was traveling in the black carriage, as they called it, which was a carriage completely barred in, a prison carriage reserved for the most dangerous criminals, and usually they were just sent directly to execution. And on the way, it was a Friday, and it was Friday very early in the day. And the Alter Rebbe, Rosh Zalman of Liadi, requested that they stop the carriage. We can't travel on Shabbos. And they said, who do you think you are? You're a prisoner on your way to be executed. You're telling us to stop. Well, who are you? They kept going. He asked them again. Please stop. They weren't going. Then an axle broke. And then they fixed the axle. They kept going. A wheel fell off. They replaced it. A horse died. They still have one. And then the other horse died. The horses died. The axle broke. The wheel fell off. They got the message. We're not going anywhere. Fast forward, the Alter Rebbe was put in prison. He was in a fortress. You know a little bit about history, about the Chabad history. He was put in the Pedopol fortress in St. Petersburg in Russia. This is a fortress surrounded by water. So whenever the Alter Rebbe had to go whenever he had to be interviewed or go through interrogation, he had to be ferried across a river. Because the offices, wherever it was that he was being interrogated, cross-interrogated, was outside the fortress, so he had to be ferried across on a boat. And one night it came time to bless the moon, Kiddush Levana, sanctify the moon. And he tells the captain of the boat, would you please stop for a moment? Because in order to perform a mitzvah, it needs to be done standing, not walking. You're standing in a place. Captain gave the same attitude. You're a prisoner, who are you? Be quiet. Yes, the second time didn't work. A third time, he didn't ask. The boat stopped. It was as if it was anchored in place. The boat wasn't moving. It wasn't moving. The captain realized something going on. And what happened? After a few moments, it continued going. And then the Alter Rebbe asked again politely, may we please stop the boat? This time the captain stopped the boat. He realized the Alter Rebbe was in charge. He's running the show. He stopped the boat. He said, by the way, he told him, I'll stop the boat, but only if you bless me. I want a blessing for you. He realized he's a saintly person. He realized he can benefit from this. He says, Alter Rebbe, I will stop the boat on condition that you give me a blessing. And he blessed him with wealth and with longevity. And he ended up going up in rank to a general in the army. And he lived a very, very long life. And that letter, he kept that little piece of, the Alter Rebbe wrote it down. He wrote it down, piece of paper, and he kept that piece of paper. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, our Rebbe, 7th Rebbe, asks a question. What was Alter Rebbe doing? If it's all about miracles, then why did he ask the captain? Just stop the boat. If he's in charge, if he's running the show anyways, just go all the way, stop the boat. He needs to Kiddush Levana, he needs to sanctify the moon, stop the boat. He needs to stop for Shabbos, stop the carriage right away. What is this that they're asking the driver to stop? Asking the captain to stop the boat? What is this game? What is this ping pong game? Back, forth, back, forth. And so the Rebbe explains to us. The whole idea, again, as we said before, the whole idea of miracles are not just there because. When we experience something, it's because the whole purpose is that everything should be within the realms of nature. Of course, the Alter Rebbe was showing them who was boss. But the point was is that the Alter Rebbe wanted to go within the realm of nature. Not that he should stop the boat, but the captain should stop the boat. And to try in all means to do it within the realm of nature. Connecting this to the Megillah. Yes, this was a miracle, but the whole point was that it should be within the realm of nature. That it should be that the king's sleep was disturbed, and that the whole point was that the king should instruct that these things should be read, and that the person who is reading it should read it. And not that the book should talk for itself. When things were going beyond... Really?
I have a question.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 5 minutes. 5 minutes left.
No. It's a miracle that we have it at all, because if the king and his son were the only two people in the room, so how do we know about it?
Oh, that's also. And the fact, again, we see that it wasn't just such an open miracle, the fact that it was concealed. The fact that all of this was written, this happened inside of a room. Right. We find out about it because of Mordechai. Obviously, all this resulted in Mordechai, etc., etc. I'm going to keep going, because we didn't get to the juicy part yet. Then he says, okay, Mordechai saved the king. The king asks, and this is verse 3, source 1, verse 3. Mana sa yikar gdula lo Mordechai al zeh. What has been done in regards to yikar, honor, ugedula, and greatness? And then the guards tell the king, Leinasa imay davar. Nothing has been said. Nothing has been done, I'm sorry. Nothing has been done at all. Now, we need to understand. We need to understand something. The king was very specific when he asked them, what has been done in regards to glory and in regards to greatness? What does it mean glory? What does it mean greatness? So the commentaries explain, what does this mean? Glory represents fame, getting the credit. That itself means a lot. Gedula, greatness, means wealth. So there are two ways to repay. Either to get money, to be paid literally for the action, and then there's the fame, being given the credit for it. So the king is asking them, what has been done to Mordechai in regards to fame? Was he ever put on the front page? The front page news? Was there ever an article written about him? Were the letters ever sent out to my kingdom telling everyone Mordechai gets the credit for saving the king's life? What about Gedulah? What about payment? Was he ever paid for his for his favor? So he was very specific. What was done in regards to glory and respect and greatness? What was the guard's response? Nothing was done. Now, what does it mean that they responded that way? If the king was very specific, answer specific. We're talking about the king, we're talking about a monarch. If the king says to you, what was done in regards to respect, fame, and money? Answer the king in kind. Loi nasa yikar ugdula l'Mordechai. Nothing was done in regards to glory. They just say, Loi nasa medavar, nothing was done. Nothing. So there's something hinting to us here. What's being hinted to us? The second paragraph in the Talmud. Talmud has Zayin Amud Aleph, and this is on the left-hand side. Leinasa imay davar, nothing was done with him. Or about 10 lines in on the left-hand side, second paragraph. And they say, Leinasa imay davar, nothing was done with him. Amar Rava says, the guards were obviously favoring Mordechai here. They were favoring Mordechai. They could have made up a story. They could have said something was done. Could have made up a story right then and there, and the king will say, "Okay, we're all done. We can go back to sleep." So they did a good favor for Mordechai just now by telling the king that nothing was done. But they said it in a very cryptic way. They said it they said it very, very short and without details. Why? Why weren't they specific? The king asked them specifically, why weren't they specific back? Says the Talmud, you want to know why they were in favor of Mordechai? You know why they told the king that Mordechai was never repaid? Not because they liked Mordechai. They couldn't stand him. No one in the parliament could stand Mordechai. By the way, King Achashverosh himself was a horrible anti-Semite himself. Even more so than Haman. He was a bigger anti-Semite than Haman. We're going to see, hopefully if there's time, we're going to see later on there was a different type of anti-Semitism. But he was anti-Semitic himself. Nobody liked Mordechai. Rather, why did they go in favor of Mordechai? Not because they loved Mordechai, Haman, but because of their hatred towards Haman. As the saying goes, your enemy's enemy is your friend. But I'm going to go even deeper than that. Remember how we started off the class saying that Esther had all this strategy. 12 different strategies in inviting the king to and Haman to a feast. To instill jealousy in the king, collusions, conspiracies, etc., etc. That very night, how would Esther even imagine that very night, a lot of it's playing off? Number one, she was exploiting her husband. She was exploiting him, trying to get him to start thinking things, and hopefully a plot thickens. And things paid off that very night. The king started thinking to himself, they're conspiring against me. He started thinking to himself, maybe Mordechai and Esther had an affair. That's what Esther want. That was part of Esther's. That was one of Esther's 12 strategies, that he should think that they were having an affair, and it happened. She wanted to instill jealousy in the entire parliament to pit them against Haman, and now we see that paid off too. It actually happened. Her strategy paid off, and we see over here they had a hatred for Haman. They couldn't stand him. They saw how Haman was abusing his power. Not that they wanted Mordechai to be promoted, but they couldn't stand the fact that Haman was abusing his power. He was abusing his power all along. He was demanding respect. And they couldn't take it. And now, earlier that day, before this night occurred, now Haman had a personal feast with the king and Esther and the queen. Now they really can't stand him. So therefore, when the king says, what was done to Mordechai for saving my life? They thought to themselves, here's an opportunity to demote Haman. Not that we're really interested in Mordechai. Can't stand him either. But now we're going to get at Haman. Here's our opportunity to say, you know what? It's time to honor somebody else. It's time to create some checks and balances here. It's time to divide the power. And we can't just have one person alone. So that's what they tell him. Now, why don't they say clearly Mordechai? Because the king said, Manasa yikar gdula leMordechai alzeh. What was done to Mordechai? And they said, Loinasa imay. Nothing was done with him. They didn't say Loinasa leMordechai. Nothing was done to Mordechai. Why did they skip the name out? The answer, my friends, is because in the following verses, right, the very next verse, Vayomer HaMelech mi v'chatzer. The king said, who is in the courtyard? It was Haman. As we know, again, we're not highlighting, we're just picking out the story. As the story goes, Haman was barging himself into the room at that very moment. He was so eager to get the king's permission to hang Mordechai the very next day. He had already built his gallows. And so he was coming into the courtyard at that very moment to almost barge in and say, King, this is my idea and I want your permission now. Little does Haman know that he's walking right into a trap. The king says, Mi v'chatzer, who's in the courtyard? How did the king know that someone was in the courtyard? How did the king know? He was speaking to somebody else right now. How did he know that Haman was in the courtyard? Two things gave it away. Number one, obviously this tells us that there was footsteps. This was right outside the inner chamber of the king. So clearly there was footsteps. And he noticed that he felt it must have been, king asked who was in the courtyard, but the king knew, says a Medrash. The king knew who was in the courtyard. He knew it was Haman. Why? Because the guards themselves started speaking in riddles. You see, the guards, as much as they couldn't stand Haman, they were afraid of him too. They were terrified of him. So when they hear footsteps, they're imagining, who else has the chutzpah to come in the middle of the night and talk to the king? Haman, the prime minister. Who else would it be? And so now when you hear thunder, a thundering voice from the other side of the room as Haman approaches, you hear, what has been done to him? What favor has been repaid by Mordechai? You think they will answer as they hear the footsteps, Haman approaching? They're not going to talk about Mordechai right now. They know that Mordechai is Haman's archenemy. So they say nothing was done to him. And they said it almost very, very quietly, like a side thing. They didn't want Haman to think about them that they were talking to the king about Mordechai. So they just, nothing was done. Nothing was done. Haman arrived at that very moment. Okay, oh my goodness. Because this is the juicy part. So, Haman comes into the king's chamber, and right away the king asks him, right away, before he has a chance to talk, he says, Haman, Vayomer Melech, Mala asayis ba'ish asher hamelech hafetz b'karei. Haman, what shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor? And it says, right away, when the king said that, Haman said in his heart, who would the king want to give honor and respect for more than me? The king's talking about me. So he tells the king, I'm just flying through this, Haman says to the king, the man that the king wishes to honor, here's what he should do. They should bring the royal garments that the king wore, and they should bring a horse that the king rode upon, and that the royal crown was placed on his head. They should put all of these garments, the crown and the horse, put this person on top of it. Parade on the horse in the center of the main road of the city. They should call out before him, so such shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. Haman saying all this. The Medrash tells us, while he's saying this, the king is turning purple with rage. Why? Because, as the Medrash tells us, what does it mean the king's sleep was disturbed? The king had a dream that Haman was poised on top of him with a sword, ready to kill him. And so that's why he woke up with a start, thinking to himself, why is Haman conspiring to kill me? Is Haman want to take my crown?
No, let's ride a horse.
Now King Ahasuerus is no fool. He hears Haman saying, royal garments, royal crown, royal horse. The king's like, he does want my crown. He does want it. Then we get to verse 10. Verse 10 we're going to focus on for the remainder of the class, if we have time, hopefully. There is so much on this one. It is beautiful. This is the verse that everything goes down. In this verse, everything goes down. We see the ultimate miracle. We see how God plays into the whole story. And this is source number 6. Source number 6. Chapter 6, verse 10. Vayomer Hamelech laHaman. And the king said to Haman, Maher, quick, rush. Kach es halavush ve'es hasus. Take the garments and take the horse. Ka'asher dibarta, like you have spoken. Va'aseh chen, and do so l'Mordechai HaYehudi, to Mordechai the Jew, Hayoshev b'shar Hamelch, who sits by the king's gates. Al tapel davar, do not take anything away. Mikol asher dibarta, from all that you have spoken. From everything that you have spoken. Now there's so much on this verse. What does it mean, maher? Quickly. Pronto. What was that? What does it mean? Rush. We said in previous classes, this whole paying back of a favor to Mordechai did this 5-6 years ago. And nothing was done until now. Now suddenly today we're rushing? What about due process? Due process. What does it mean, due process? The king presents the order to the parliament clears it, carries out, takes 2 or 3 months. We set the thing in motion. Meyer, rush. For the last 6 years you were sleeping, and now suddenly rush. Why rush now? And also, Kachas halavush says, take the garment and the horse that you have spoken, and do so to Mordechai, the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gates. The king was clear enough already. But then he adds, do not take anything away from what you have spoken. Well, the king just said to do something. If you have a monarchy, if you have a super powerful king that tells you in instructions, do so for Mordechai, you would be expected to perform every single thing that comes out of the king's mouth. The king has to remind him, don't do anything, don't take away anything that he already said. Kasher dibarta, do everything that you have spoken. So, again, riddles. And do so for Mordechai, the Jew who is sitting at the king's gates. We could have said this entire verse in like 5 words. Vayomer HaMelech aseh chen l'Mordechai. And the king said, do so for Mordechai. After everything that Haman just said. Instead of, that was 5 words. But no, and the king said to Haman, rush, take the horse and the garment. By the way, what about the crown? Didn't say that. That you have spoken about, and do so for Mordechai the Jew, who was sitting at the king's gates. Do not take anything away from what you have spoken.
Was he afraid Haman would change things? That's why he got a specific override there, emphasis.
That excellent point that you raised.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, this is actually one of what you had just said is one of the commentaries. So, we're going to try to do things step by step. Let's first understand why is it we're gonna do things a little bit out of order. First, I want to endeavor to explain why is it that the king said Mordechai, the Jew who sits at the king's gates. What, we didn't know who Mordechai was? That he was Jewish? Really, he was Jewish. New to me. And that he was sitting at the king's gates. Well, duh, he's a parliamentarian. Of course he's at the king's gates. And Haman didn't know this? What's going on? So, back to the back of your source sheet, back to the Talmud. The Talmud says this to us. Tana Lai, Aseh Chen LaMordechai. This starts off, by the way, on the bottom of the left column. Aseh Chen LaMordechai, do this to Mordechai. So the Talmud says to us, the reason why it says Mordechai, the Jew who sits at the palace gates. So clearly, there are some sentences in between. There has to be a reason why the Megillah is saying this to us. And the Talmud explains to us the reason why the king was specified all of this was because there was a conversation going on between the king and Haman that wasn't mentioned here, and that is, the king first said, do this to Mordechai. Amalei, he says, Manu Mordechai. Which Mordechai are you talking about? It's as if like, are you kidding me? Mordechai? He's trying to delay things. Mordechai? What Mordechai? Who Mordechai? Amalei, he says to him, Ha-Yehudi, the Jew. The Jew. Amalei says to them, Tuva Mordechai Ikabiyudai. There are many Mordechai the Jews. It's like a name Jack Smith. There are so many Mordechais. There are so many Mordechai the Jew. All over the place. So he tells him, Amalei Hayoshib B'Shar HaMelech. The one who sits by the palace gates. Now that could only be one Mordechai. It explains in the Yards Davash, explains in the commentaries. The Jewish people did not really have too many privileges. Again, we have to remember, King Ahasuerus himself was an anti-Semite as well. The Jews did not always enjoy all of the privileges. They didn't have complete freedom. One of the things that they did not have the privilege of was that Jews were generally not allowed within the palace, around the palace area, around the vicinity of the palace. And they were only allowed by the palace when they had special privileges. Mordechai was put into the parliament. By the way, how was he put into the parliament? So this is in chapter 2. I'm just telling you outside. When Esther was first promoted and became queen, when she first became queen, she had a little dialogue with the king, and she basically convinced the king to bring Mordechai in and include him in the parliament, because until then there were no Jews there. What happened? She said to him, she convinced him as follows. She said to him, you know, every king in history until now always had a Jewish advisor. There was always a Jewish advisor. King Nebuchadnezzar first had Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Then afterwards, when they went into Bavel, he had Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They had all different advisors. There were always Jewish advisors. So, king, you too should have a Jewish advisor. Because history has shown that Jewish advisors were always beneficial to the king and to the empire. The king says, aha, I see. Yeah, you're right. The king didn't know she was Jewish. Yeah, good idea. I like that. So you have anyone in mind? I just said back, it just happens to be, I happen to know of somebody. This person has integrity, a respected person, a distinguished person, a person worthy of being in the parliament. Mordechai. The king says, perfect. Again, the king was very impulsive. Perfect. Mordechai, you're in the parliament now. So Mordechai didn't have any high rankings, but he was part of parliament. So you see how things work. Esther really saves the day, because it was only because Esther suggested Mordechai that Mordechai was in the palace gates, and that's why he was able to hear Bigsan and Seresh conspiring to kill the king, and gave the message over to Esther. He understood Tarshish, the language that was spoken then. Why? Because he was the head of the Sanhedrin, the head of the head Jewish court, and the Jewish courts were expected to know all 70 languages so that they will be able to hear any dialogue. Any person that came to present themselves to them, they should be able to understand them in any language that are presented. So every single member of the Sanhedrin, the head Jewish court, had to know all 70 languages, including the dialect of Tarshish. So Mordechai understood everything that they were saying. How was he there? Because Esther had brought him there. But no Jews were usually allowed there. By the way, this concept of Jews not being allowed in a certain place, is not something that's ancient. By the way, in Tsarist Russia, all the way until 1918, Jews were not allowed in St. Petersburg. In the city, that was a capital city of St. Petersburg where the Tsar lived. The Tsar resided. Not just that they were not allowed. They were not allowed to live there. That's what I meant. They were not allowed to live there. And if they ever entered St. Petersburg, they were never allowed to stay the night. Not all Jews. Some Jews did have the privilege of living in St. Petersburg. Who had the privileges? Only those that were of benefit to the Tsar. If they were influential, if they had a lot of money, if they did good business, then they were given, the privileges. But the
Common man.
The common Yankel Shmerel would not be allowed in St. Petersburg. If they passed through, they couldn't stay the night. And if they did, they were in big trouble. So when the king tells Haman, Mordechai the Jew who sits at the palace gates, that clears things up. Because even if you're going to tell me that there are 2 or 3 Mordechai Yehudis, there's only one that got the privilege of sitting at the king's gates.
Similar to the Abraham story with take your son. Well, I have 2 sons.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
son you love. Well, I
Very
love
good.
both.
Very good. Excellent. Very good. That's lahavdil, to separate. That's the most beautiful thing. When he was alluding to when God told Abraham, he says, sacrifice your son. He says, which son? I'm so ready to do your will. Tell me, which son? Because I had Yishmael and Yitzchak. He says, your only son. He says, I have 2 only sons. He's an only son to his mother, and he's an only son to his mother. That you love. Abraham says, I love both of them. That's Yitzchak. So to peel things away. So similar to that. So, we're going to go now to, what is this thing rushing? Why rushing? So I'm going to present to you the Yard's Davash is brought in the Memlayis, etc. That says as follows. Fascinating. He says rush. Why rush? So, there are many different explanations. But this one is a beauty. And this is as follows. Achashverosh, as we said before, was thinking all sorts of things during his sleep. Why is it that what does Esther want from me? That was the main thing. What is it that Esther's hiding from me? What does she really want from me? Is it something that was not paid back? Or was it something not paid back? And she starts thinking to himself. And especially after he hears the news that Mordechai saved the king, everything came back to him. Oh, he barely understood. He barely remembered the story. It was 6 years ago. But now it all comes back to him. Wow, Mordechai saved my life. How did Mordechai give the message to me that saved my life? Through Esther. So Mordechai and Esther were both instrumental in saving my life. What was done? Nothing. Ah, now I get it. Esther is upset at me because Mordechai, who she was instrumental in bringing into the parliament, Mordechai saved the king's life. Mordechai saved the king's life. Mordechai saved the king's life because Mordechai was part of parliament, and who brought him into the parliament? Esther. So Esther is part of this. She's involved. And Esther is upset at me that I never paid back Mordechai. That's why she's conspiring. You know what? Says Achashverosh himself. This is probably what she wants to ask me tomorrow by the feast. She's probably thinking to herself. She's waiting for the right moment to tell me, what is it that you want, Esther? I want you to pay back Mordechai. That's what King Ahasuerus thinks to himself. It makes sense. It's logical. For the past 6 years, nothing has been done. She's very upset at me because I didn't pay back Mordechai. And so she's doing a bold move, coming into my room, coming into my inner chamber to ask me to come to a feast because she wants to make sure that I pay back Mordechai. That must be. And when is the feast? In the morning. The very next day. So he says to himself, aha, I know what to do. I want to be on her good side. She's my wife. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take care of business today. I'm going to honor him today. And so therefore, later on, when I sit with my Queen Esther and she asks me about about paying back Mordechai, I'll tell her, don't worry about it. I took care of you, right? I took care of business. And they'll put him on Esther's good side. That's why he told Haman, Maher, rush. We must take care of business now. This has to happen. Don't wait 2 months from now. The feast is happening tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm sitting with Queen Esther. Make sure that this is done early in the morning. Make sure that this is taken care of tomorrow, so that by the time we sit by the feast with Esther, I can tell her, we took care of business already. But then he tells him, Kachas alavush v'sasus. So I'm going to jump into that right now. Take the horse and take the clothing. Don't take anything. Yeah. So, Talmud doesn't tell this to us. So I'm going to quote to you now the Targum Sheni. Targum Sheni really gives this to us beautifully. Listen to this. And I quote, the king says to Haman, quickly, go to my warehouse, go to the royal warehouse, and take from there from my most precious garments, from my museum, if you may say so. I haven't really seen it myself, but they say that in the Smithsonian in Washington D.C. they actually have the dresses of, I think, every first lady, the inaugural dress, things like that. It was very, very common for a king. It's like when people get married. So very often the bride keeps the wedding gown. Why is she keeping it? Hopefully not to use ever again. Hopefully not. But she's keeping it. Why? It's sentimental. This is the gown that, my wedding day. It was very normal for kings and for dignitaries to keep to order a customized special outfit, grand outfit for the day of their inauguration, and they would keep it. For today, present day museums is for common people. He had it in his treasury, so you had it in a special designated warehouse, designated wardrobe. So he says to him, I want you to go to that very specific wardrobe and take from there Sheira Tova Parginan. He says, Ba'avn Tavin, I want you to take a special garment, beautifully ordained, beautifully jeweled. Battalion Ba'arba Kanasi Dide, and take the one that has golden pomegranates, golden bells and pomegranates hanging.
What about that this week?
This could either mean the garments of the high priest, this week's Torah portion, talking about how they made it, or some opinions say that this is something that is, this was a piece of garment that was complementing the garments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Of course, as we know, as the Medrash says, the king Achashverosh had all of the garments and vessels of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Holy Temple, he had with him. He had in his treasuries, he had all the garments, including the garments of the high priest. And so according to that opinion, it actually comes to show how much the king really appreciated the Jewish culture, even though he couldn't stand the Jews. He appreciated the Jewish culture, and therefore his inaugural outfit mirrored that of the high priest. Vesav, take from there also the Macedonian golden wreath. He says, take from Macedonia. Take from there the golden Macedonian crown. The Macedonian crowns were wreaths. And so the king must have had a wreath. And later on, of course, the Romans took over, but that Roman olive branching that they had on their heads, those wreaths, I mean, they got it from the Greeks, who got it from the Persians, who got it from Macedonia. So we see how we can imagine already what is going on and being placed on Mordechai's head. And take it, he says, take this is a special Macedonian wreath that was given to me as a gift from Macedonia for my day of inauguration. Very, very prized item. And Vesamitaman Safsira Visharyana Dili Daisin Le Yasim Min Kush. I want you to take a special garment, a special helmet that was given to me as a gift from Kush, Ethiopia. Utrain Rahinin di Levushin Levusha de Malchus de Margalisa da Aisun Yasi Lumimidinas Afrique. I want you to give to me special jewels, that these jewels were given to me from Africa. Now, where did we have this last? Queen Esther. She also had special jewels from southern Africa that she put on her garments when she came and approached the king after 3 days of fasting. We spoke about that last class. And then go get the horse. Ofuk la'er de malka, go into the horses, go to the stables. Varsusia de malka de klembereshi de raisa de shmei shifragaz. I want you to go to a specific horse, and the Targum Sheni even gives the name. Go to my prized horse. His name is Shifraguz. You know, when we have the Kentucky Derby, you know, the horses have names to them. One is Pharaoh, right? So this horse's name was Shifraguz. Yep. And I want you to take all of these things. Yep, I want you to take all of these things. I want you to give it to put it on Mordechai. So this is great. So he wants Mordechai to put on all of these things. Now, on the Haman answers. He says, it says over here, the Kad Shema Haman. I'm saying this in Aramaic. When Haman hears this, what do you think Haman's thinking about? When Haman hears this, Pizgama Hadain Sagya Ba'ish Alai, he was in shock. Ishne Vainai Ischashcha, his face becomes darkened. Opume Istilif, and his face, Apuma, his face becomes Istilif, becomes weakened. The blood drains from his face. And he feels like he's going to drop. Not just the king. This was his idea. He was telling the king to honor someone. And here the king not only chooses his arch enemy, Mordechai, but tells him, honor him. Not just with any garment and horse and crown that you said. No, I want you to go to my special prized museum. I want you to take from there my inaugural outfit, my inaugural wreath, crown, my prized stallion, the stallion Shifragaz, and all of that due to Mordechai. Ani Haman Vamel Malka Mari Malka Nefishin. So he says to the king, what's going on over here? Continues, I'm going to continue quoting because I'm seeing the time. He says to the king, I'm going to quote now the Me'am Leis. I'm jumping a little bit. He says to the Me'am Leis says, I don't know who was Mordechai. I'm just going to read out in English even though this is in Hebrew. So the king says, Mordechai the Jew. There are many Mordechais, etc., etc. So listen to the way the Me'am Leis puts this entire twist. He says, so Haman says, my king, it's true that there is this person that the king wishes to honor. Honor? Who needs honor? Who needs the fame? Who needs the credit? You think Mordechai the Jew needs the credit? Don't give him credit like that. Pay him. He did you a favor, pay him back. So this is actually the Talmud. The Talmud actually says this right now, and this is the top of the right-hand column. The Talmud says, he says to the king, Sagi le bechad diskarta, inami bechad nara. You want to? Is this really what it's all about? You want to pay back Mordechai? Give him a township. Make him a duke of some island. Put him in charge of something. Or give him a river. What does it mean, give him a river? What does that mean? Giving a river, not just for transportation. Give him ownership of a river that will allow him to collect tolls, kind of like a highway. Put him in, let him collect. Give him something that will make him rich. Put him in charge of a township. Let him collect taxes. You know, it used to be in the old days, in the old days in Poland and in Europe, that there would be a king collect taxes, and then the king would appoint dukes, noblemen, squires. They'll be in charge of townships. They'll be in charge of different areas, and they basically were like their own, king of the castle in their little area. They had their own army. They had their own people. They had their own prisons, and they basically ran the show. They could kill people. They could do whatever they want, and as long as they paid their taxes to the king couldn't care less. That's the way it was in the old days. So over here, Haman's telling King Achashverosh, you want to pay him back for a favor? Put him in charge of a city. You're in charge of the entire world, 127 provinces. Give him a big city to be in charge of. What is this? He parading him. So what happens? The king says, what does Achashverosh say? Haman, good idea. Great idea. That too. You know what? Great idea. Let's put him in charge of a city. You still got to take him on the parade. We'll give him a river. Great idea. Give him a river. Well, we put in money. Of course, money. Fine. Give it to him. So the Me'am Leis goes even better. Trying to find the right place. I'm going to wrap up with this, but it's beautiful to hear because there's so much of this. Here it is. Here we go. Omer Haman. Haman says, I'm pleading with you, king. This person is not just my enemy, but he's the enemy of my ancestors. My ancestors' enemy. And there's so much garbage between me and this person, I want to kill him. Your Majesty, I prepared a whole gallows. I wanted to kill him. He's putting himself in the trap. But now that you want to give Mordechai, all of these favors, why don't you just give him some money, make him rich? Haman's thinking to himself, he's going to die anyways in 11 months. He's going to be killed, and I'll take his money. Let me just pay him off this way, and then all good. Then he goes even further and he tells the king, my king, didn't I give you 10,000 silver pieces in order to be in charge of the Jews? Don't do this to me, king. I am prepared to give 10,000 silver pieces to you. Just don't make me do this to Mordechai. Don't do this to me for Mordechai. What did the king say? Great idea. You give him 10,000 silver pieces. In fact, the king says, Leich ten le'eskum, give him that amount, and you know what? With this, I'm going to put him in charge of you and your house. Right. And Me'am Leis goes even further. King Achashverosh says to him, do you think I'm a fool? I remember back in the day, the Medrash tells us this. Many, many years before, the king had sent Haman and Mordechai together to a war in Hodu, India, somewhere far, far away. And on the way, Haman there was a sandstorm, and what happened was that Haman, all the camels, everyone had to buckle down, and Haman saw that his camel was getting all upset, and a bag dropped, and there was some gold in there, and Haman ran towards the gold. In the meantime, the camel ran away, and he lost all of his belongings because he was running after the gold. And basically, part of his belongings was his water supply. And he ran out of water. He got very, very thirsty. They were in the desert. I'm saying this very quickly. He says to Mordechai, give me some water. Mordechai says, I'm not going to give you water. I need the water to live. And he says, please, if you don't give it to me, I will die. He says, I'm sorry. I'm going to die too. So Haman says to him, doesn't it say in your Torah, what does it say in your Torah about helping another person? What, are you going to leave me to die? So Mordechai tells him, oh, actually, now that you mentioned it, the Torah actually tells us that if you only have a water supply for one person and there's two people, the Torah says that person should save himself. Better that person should save himself instead of both of them dying for sure. Here it's what we call Shema Shema versus Bari Bari. You have a doubt if he has his own water supply, there's a chance that he'll live. But if they share it, then both of them will certainly die. Haman says, please do anything, do anything. Mordechai says, you know what? I'll give it to you. On one condition. Haman says, what? I'm prepared to, my whole life, I'm ready to give it to you I'm ready to be given to you as a slave. You are my master. Mordechai says, you know what? You said you're going to be my slave? Okay. I'll give you some of my water. Here's my shoe. I want you to sketch into my shoe that I, Haman, are now going to be the slave of Mordechai. Haman does that and he gives him some water. Literally, later on that day, suddenly a caravan arrives coming from the capital city, and they were heading in a certain direction, and they took everyone. So that very day, everything worked out anyways. But Mordechai has written on his shoe that Haman is now his slave. So King Achashverosh somehow got wind of this, and so he told Haman, you think I'm a fool? I know that you are Mordechai's slave. I know that everything is owed to Mordechai. So what does it matter to you that I'm putting your entire estate in Mordechai's hands? He's in charge of you anyways. I'm sure he's just playing his mind. So so Haman keeps going. He says, at least let somebody else. You know what, King? I will go to the stable. I'll get the horse. I'll get the clothing. I'll get everything. Just don't make me parade. Maybe my children, my sons, they are also very distinguished people. Let them do it. Just don't put me leading the horse. What do you think the king says? Great idea. You, your wife, your kids, everyone, your entire family is going to be leading that horse.
Keep going. Give me more ideas.
Haman says, he's really digging it for himself. Haman continues, he says, you know, King, he's trying to delay it all he can because he can't bear the thought of him, his arch enemy. And he says to the king, think about it, King. His last ditch resort. The king, it's not appropriate. It's beneath his majesty to do such a thing. After all, Mordechai was just a regular parliamentarian. He wasn't a high-ranking officer. In fact, it was very well known. Mordechai, by the way, was very poor. He had a very distinguished rank, but didn't mean he had money. So Haman says to the king, look, Mordechai is a regular commoner, a parliamentarian, but the lowest rank, the backbench. He also is very poor. It's very beneath the majesty to put him in such a high-ranking position so fast. Let's have some process, a general promotion over time, becomes high-ranking. Well, then it'll be appropriate. Let's do it in 2 years from now. Today, let's do it in 2 years. What does the king say? Great idea. Great idea, Haman. So starting from today, I'm putting him as a high-ranking minister. He's now my high-ranking minister, and 10,000 silver pieces, and he's a duke of a certain island and of a city, and he owns a river. He's going to collect taxes. He's going to become very, very rich. And you, your wife, your kids are leading him on the horse. And then Achashverosh just begins trolling him. He says, look, you see how precious you are in my eyes, Haman? I listen to every word that you say. I respect your opinion so much, Haman. I respect your advice as a prime minister that I've listened to everything that you've said so far. So he can't bear this anymore. He says, when Haman sees all of this, he sees that he's not convincing the king and that he's digging himself further in. He lowers his eyes, says the man wise. He turns to the king and he says, look, I see clearly that you are liking Mordechai more than me. But you know, your majesty, that I've written decrees, the king sealed them, and there were decrees going throughout the kingdom that all the Jews are going to be killed, including Mordechai. And now, this is as if you are nullifying everything that I've done. The king says, great idea. You know what? Let all of the runners come right back to the city of Shushan and bring back all of those letters. And clearly, yes, clearly I don't like you anymore. So Haman says back to the king, King, please, kill me. Take my life. I don't want to do this. And that's when the king says, Maher, quickly, take the horse, take the garments, do it to Mordechai. And he starts screaming at him. It says the Me'amlez in the Targum Sheni, when the king says, Al tapel davar, don't take away a single thing, Mikol shedibarti, from what you have spoken, these were the king's last words to him as he was heading out the door. It's as if the king was screaming after him, don't you dare take away anything of what I've told you. Every little iota. Especially after that conversation, he knew that Haman was the type of guy that would try to wishy-wash things. Okay, I'll give him the horse. All right, so you take care of this, you take care of that. We won't do it today. We'll do it next month. We'll do it in a year and a half from now. We'll first go through Congress. It'll take several months anyways. So he says, Maher, quickly, rush, now. Take care of business. So we see, especially based on the Medrash, we see how everything that Haman was conspiring to do went right back on him. And Esther all this time knew absolutely nothing what was going on. How would she even imagine that everything, that her entire strategy not only came to fruition, but came even more than what she would have imagined? Here, this is literally inviting the king to a feast, instilling hatred and jealousy, and conspiracy theories, and the king is so impulsive, he's acting fast. This whole thing doesn't make sense. The king's acting so fast. And why is it that he wants to be doing the inaugural garments? So now I'm going to quote to you Yard's Davash. And this is beautiful. This is, he says like this. Again from the Me'amlez. Now, Achashverosh, he explains, had a strategy of his own. We must understand, there's another question, an even better question. What's going on over here? Didn't we just say Achashverosh is an anti-Semite? An even greater anti-Semite than Haman? And suddenly he likes the Jews. He's taking away all the decrees. Right? He's demoting Haman. Raising up Mordechai. Suddenly he's their friend? Or we thought he hated the Jews. What's going on over here? There's so many questions not answered. So this explanation puts everything into perspective. We have to understand the anti-Semitism of Achashverosh and the anti-Semitism of Haman, they both hated Jews. But their hatred, their anti-Semitism, stemmed from, they were worlds apart in their perspectives. Worlds apart. You see, Haman, his hatred towards Jews was a hatred of Amalek. He hated Jews, he just hated the sight of Jews being alive. I cannot stand seeing a Jew. All Jews must die. That was Haman. That was a Hitler of his day. He just could not stand the sight of a Jew being alive, period. Doesn't matter what the Jew did to him. Doesn't matter when he did something, he didn't do something. He hated the Jew. King Achashverosh, his hatred towards Jews wasn't based out of hatred towards the Jew himself, but based out of paranoia. The Medrash tells us the stargazers, he still believed in astrology, the stargazers told Achashverosh, one day a Jew is going to replace your throne. And so the king was very paranoid about that. He hated the Jews because he was afraid of his own throne, his own seat. He was afraid that the Jews would one day take over his throne and crush and crumble the Persian Empire. That was his hatred of Jews. So all this time he was thinking to himself, if I got rid of the Jews, then I won't have any challenge to my throne. That's where his anti-Semitism was stemming from paranoia. So then, Of course, he believed in astrology. He was superstitious. And so over here, he suddenly thinks to himself, I have an idea. Again, he was brilliant. Brilliant and a fool at the same time. He thinks to himself, I have an idea. What am I going to do? I'm going to take the inaugural garment. I'm going to take the inaugural crown, the inaugural horse. I'm going to put Mordechai on it. What am I doing? I'm going to make Mordechai a king for a day. And then, this will fulfill the stargazers. They say they're going to take over my throne. So I'm going to take care of business in the stars. I'm going to make Mordechai king for one day. He'll be king for one day. And then I won't have to hate the Jews anymore. I'll be their friends. I'll be nice to them. Because it won't be a challenge to my throne anymore. It's been fulfilled. Aha. Now we get why he's saying to Haman, Maher, quickly, take not just any crown, garment, and horse. Take the inaugural one. We're going to make Mordechai a king for a day. And at the end of the day, so therefore, Al Tapel Davar Mikal Shadibarta, don't miss a single thing. Because Mordechai must be proclaimed as a king today. That's why, now we understand why Chazar HaMelech, as the Talmud tells us, the king screamed at Haman on his way out and says, Haman! Maher v'al tevatel shum davar mimasha dibarti. Do not miss a single thing from what you have spoken. We must do this in a way that is quickly. I'm going to finish off. I keep saying I'm going to finish off. I could really keep going. There's so much over here. I'm going to finish off with this. With Chassidus. Because we have to. Let's talk about the Hasidic insight into the word Maher. Rush. Do things quickly. I'm going to quote to you Hasidic discourse from the Mittel Rebbe. Mittel Rebbe on the Megillah. He says as follows. Let's talk about the Hasidic insight into this concept of Maher, rush, and why Hasus as Halavush ves Hasus, the garment and the horse. What's this? The garment and the horse. So the Mittel Rebbe says, let's understand something first. The Arizal, the holy Arizal, the holy Kabbalist, says something very fascinating. Es halavush ve'es hasus, the garment and the horse, is acronym Aleph, the first letter of each word, Aleph, Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. This, explains the Kabbalists, is one of the names of God, a very special name of God. We'll mispronounce it on purpose. Ikva, Akva. Aleph, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. It's a special name of God, a very special name of God, which shows on the connection between heaven and earth combined. How do we know that this is a name that connects heaven and earth? Because we've had this name of God. We've had this name of God earlier. In the very first verse of the Torah, Bereshis bara Elokim, Es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz, acronym also Aleph, Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. God created the heavens and the earth. Heaven and earth together. This, by the way, tells us how God's name is hidden in the Megillah. First of all, that word. Also, by the way, earlier in chapter 5, when Esther tells the king, Yavai hamelech v'Haman hayoim ela mishta asher asisilei, that the king and Haman shall come to a feast. When Esther said that, Yavai hamelech v'Haman hayoim is an acronym Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. So that's the second place where we have God's name in the Megillah. So therefore, the name Aleph, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey, that name of God represents the connection between heaven and earth. And so explains the Kabbalists, it was placed here in the Megillah in this very verse to tell us that Es halavush ve'es hasus, the garment and the horse, represents heaven and earth. Asks the Mittel Rebbe, what's going on over here? Of all things in the Megillah, the garment and the horse represents God and the heaven and earth. What's going on here? So the Mittel Rebbe tells us something very fascinating. I'm going to try to say this very, very short. Basically, in this world, and there are two different types of energies. There are energies called makif, which is more atmospherical, if that's even a word. What's going on in the atmosphere. And then there's something called mimale, something that permeates, going into us, that digests, that goes into our systems in a very specific way. So for example, we're in a good mood because there's a good atmosphere in the room. I feel warm, I feel cold, I feel that the place is stony atmosphere. All of these are atmospherical. Is that affecting me in a personal fashion? No, but it's in the atmosphere, it's around. Then there is mamale, something that our intakes, something that's much more specific that has to do with me. In turn, there are two types of garments. There's a garment that's more surrounding, and then there's a type of garment that's custom fit. Custom designed to fit us. In thoughts and in speech, we have this as well. Sometimes you will have something that's more atmospherical, and something you will have something much more personal that you can relate to. For example, you could go to a speech, you could go to a lecture of a person, and you'll be enwrapped by his or her genius. Wow, what a very smart intellectual person that person is. Did I understand a single thing? Would I be able to give over what that person said by the lecture? No, I don't understand a word that they said, but I do know, wow, I'm in awe. We've all had that once in a while, one time in our life, experiencing something like that, for example. As opposed to mamale, intake, where there's a message that you can relate over to somebody else. Okay. So, the heavens are a representation of God, a representation of God's revelation into this world in a way of a garment. A way of a garment. In fact, the heavens very often are alluded by the term garment. The term garments usually is the usual term given to the heavens. In fact, for those of us that put on a talus, we say the following verse: Oita kasalma, noita shemayim kayariya. That God, He wore light as a garment, kasalma as a garment, noita shemayim, He wraps the heavens, kayariya, like a shawl, like a cloth. So the heavens are given as are talked about as given the term as a garment. However, you could be enthralled in the concept, you could be enwrapped in it, but how do you bring it down? How do you relate it to somebody else? The ability to give it over to somebody else, that is the sus, that's the horse. Because a horse, what's the horse's purpose? To carry things from one thing to another. It carries things over. It's your ability to take that which is more atmospherical, that even those things, even the type of clothing, garment that's taken in yourself, being able to relate over. The idea of garments is the heavens. The idea of bringing it over to something else represents the earth, bringing something down to earth. And so, when we say es halavush ve'es hasus, the garment and the horse, we're alluding to God. It's as if God is saying, Maher kachas halavush ve'es hasus, quickly take the garment and the horse. God is basically saying, quickly, it is time to reveal the ultimate miracle. The miracle within the realm of nature, of course, of saying, all of this being done to Mordechai and Maher, ad mehera yards davari. When God decrees something, it gets carried out very, very quickly. And you know that whenever God says it's time to wake up, it's time to end suffering, it's time to end exile, it is done in a very, very quick way. And so this is why Es halavush v'esasus, the garment and the horse, is alluding to God. The heavens and earth coming together in a very revealing way, where we see the ultimate miracle. And as we said, and as we explained at length, this explains why it was collusions, but it was really delusions. It was Haman conspiring and trying to bring about all this, but his own house of cards falls right down. His house collapses. And all of this unbeknownst to Esther. And she's going to come back the next day to sit by a feast. Unbeknownst to her, everything was already put in play. Literally the day before. So you can see how God's hand is playing in all of this. In a very, very quick way, things change around. Haman's entire life gets switched. He was going from a prime minister, and King Ahasuerus, as the commentary says, he was humbling him. He wanted to humble him. Haman's advisors, the advisors to the king, the parliamentarians, as we said, nothing was done. They were now conspiring against Haman. Now everyone was against Haman. Haman was being stripped of his power. Haman is now being humiliated, a very hasty humiliation in public. And we see the hand of God in all of this, how everything moved in very, very quickly. And so this is why this is the third part in the story, highlighting Mordechai's play in refusing to bow to Haman, Esther's play in going into the king and putting all of these strategies in place, and Hashem, God, is putting all those strategies in place immediately, like this, very quickly, and we see Haman's conspiracies and Haman's tactics are all turning against him in a very, very quick holiday of Purim. That's how Purim all comes about. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you, Anonymous, for sponsoring, and next week we talk about Purim. But how? We'll talk about overview of Purim and wrap up our Purim series next week at 8 p.m. We changed the clocks this Sunday. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for watching. See you all next week.